Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I'm Hercules Invictus, and today I'm living mythology. I'm proud to bring you Brian's Drive-In Theater with Brian Walker, and we're going to be exploring something weird today. Greetings and welcome, Brian. How are you?
I'm well tonight, Hercules. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm looking forward to hearing about one of my favorite video companies of yesteryear.
And I until I started working on this topic of Mike Vraney and Something Weird Video, I didn't realize just how many of their titles I have. I had no idea. We've been pulling them out for the past couple of days out of our collection, and we keep finding ones that I didn't remember were Something Weird. So I'm kind of well, not shocked, but just amazed at the number of them I have. And I've been a Something Weird Video fan for and customer for actually a long time. Something Weird Video started in Seattle way back in 1990
Mhm.
with Mike Vraney. And Mike Vraney had been, among other things, he'd run a venue, or run, I should say, a venue in downtown Seattle where a lot of punk bands used to play in the late 70s and early 80s. And he wound up managing some of them, including the Dead Kennedys, which I had no idea
Nor did I.
um, that you had that much weight and sway in the punk movement, especially in Seattle. So that was kind of cool to find that out. And he was really young when that part of his life came and went. Punk music was over by the early '80s, essentially. It sort of got wrapped up into new wave, and not wrapped up, it's subsumed, I should say, by new wave, and it was pretty short genre, but a lot of fun at the time. And I just, like I said, I just didn't know that. But in addition to being, a big music fan, he was also a big movie fan. And much like you and me, back in the day, when it came to, you could read or hear about, a film by a certain director or starring a certain person that you'd always wanted to see, but trying to find that movie, even in the age of VHS, wasn't always very easy.
Right.
And back in 1990, he had been gathering old 16 millimeter prints of very obscure films, and a lot of these were old drive-in prints. Back then, by the late 70s and early 80s, a lot of drive-ins were closing, and some of them had old stockpiles of 16 and 35 millimeter stuff in the back, and a lot of TV stations did too. And a lot of the early Something videos were old TV station prints and such. But he had more than that too. He did a lot of vintage girly arcade loops like Betty Page.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, I've got one of the I'm like I said, I'm just shocked at how many of their titles I've got. But like this Betty Page Varieties and Teaserama. These are not, well, they were risque in the late 1940s and early 1950s, but you really don't. I I guess they might have been titillating back then, but I don't think there's anything titillating about them now. They almost oddly seem wholesome in a way.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. I was watching some old movies that were very risque or adult for their day, and there was something innocent about them, and they didn't seem sexualized at all.
We live in an era where you can see like a cornucopia of perversions in 3 seconds. As long as you log into Google. And back then, you had to go to kind of the shady side of town into kind of what was, I'm sure, a dirty theater. And I don't mean dirty from the standpoint of that they showed programming like this. I mean, it just hadn't been clean. Mike Franey also collected a lot of drive-in movie trailers too, and they were a great repository that we had I think the first, some of the first something weird videotapes we bought were some of the old trailers, and that spurred me on because there were like 60 or 70 trailers in this one VHS collection that we had. And I hadn't seen most of the movies and certainly didn't have copies of them. So I kind of made it my passion there for a while to track them down and find them. Unfortunately, something weird and Mike Franey did us all right because he did start putting those movies out on VHS and really created a market for films that were by then forgotten. It hadn't been for him and and a few other people out there. I think a lot of exploitation films would have just sort of kind of slid into the abyss.
Hmm.
And he, well, not single-handedly, but he was a really instrumental in bringing a lot of these films to the forefront. Some of the films that we call our favorites at my house anyway now. Right now, I've got Blaze Star Goes Nudist on.
I have that one as well.
It is Greg's favorite movie. For him, it's the Citizen Kane of nudie films. And I mean, there is nudity in it, but I mean, it's everybody shot from the back for the most part, certainly the men.
Right.
And a lot of it's done in long shot too. So you're having to get your spectacles on until you can really see anything, and you can't see anything really. But back when these films were made, these nudie cuties in the late 50s and early 1960s, one way to get around the Hays Code and actually show nudity was to film in nudist camps
Yeah.
because then it took on more of a documentary feel, and that was a way to skirt the Hays Code. And um, there again, there's just something oddly wholesome about them. I'm watching this right now, and I'm thinking, gosh, it's funny. The movie's actually unintentionally hilarious to watch. The dialogue is just ridiculous, and so is the plot line. It's just really funny, and that's one of the reasons why we like it. But the nudity, oh my god, yeah,
Yeah, there's one movie that was on the that same DVD where these two friends go to the moon, and the moon is a nudist camp. Uh,
nude on the moon.
and
It's actually shot nicely. It was these are mostly shot in color, mostly the nudie cuties, and the surviving prints are really good.
mhm.
I don't know where that's another amazing thing about it. Not only did he start collecting all of this stuff, he started finding incredible copies of some of this stuff. And I can't believe it has stood the test of time. Blaze Stargo's Nudist is a 65-year-old movie.
And he also started on his when he started doing the full movies rather than the trailers, he'd add trailer goodies themed to whatever the movie he was selling you, or the two movies he was selling you happened to be. There'd be dozens of trailers that showed you other movies that he had available.
Smart
Yeah.
man. He, you know, these obscure exploitation films obviously had a limited market, but he knew he knew how to market to those people. A lot of those people, a lot of the people buying these and watching these were older and could remember, maybe not seeing them, but hearing about them. If you pick up an old newspaper, and sometimes you'll see these on Facebook, depending on which concerns you follow on Facebook, you'll find old newspaper. Well, they're ads for movies and theaters and such. Ads really, and some of them are just amazing. Um, I've been collecting them actually, the images, not the actual newspapers. But you can see in some of these are early 60s to late 70s newspaper ads for these movies. And some of them were on the risque side, you could tell. Those had some of the biggest ads, to tell you the truth, in those newspapers. Um, And there were people, I'm sure kids who, every house, well, not every house, but I'd say most houses got a newspaper back then. And I'm sure that, especially the ones in the bigger metro areas, would see things like that and want to see them. Well, now those people, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. But 35, 36 years ago, when something weird started, those people were collecting a bunch of stuff.
Right.
And God knows we did. I mean, like I said, I had no idea how much something weird stuff we had. And some of these are, oddly enough, my favorite movies. So, and had it not been for him and his efforts, um, I would never have been able to find copies of these, and wouldn't know of some of them, surely, because the Something Weird catalog used to, in the days, in the days before the web, I mean, the catalog itself was so helpful because you did get descriptions of the films, and you knew that this was stuff you weren't going to find anywhere else.
One of the things that I had planned to do creatively, and it just never materialized, even though twice it came very close to becoming a reality, was to have a show on e-radio that dealt with the like Something Weird video and Alpha video and all those companies that preserve these ancient, obscure, and very strange treasures, and then to have a cable show that dealt with the non-risque or not so much risque movies. And I had a plot that tied them both together, and it was, very much in the vein of other shows that had like thematic hosts, like Count Floyd from Second City Television, and it was
Joe
all,
Flaherty.
and it was all tied together. And I put together like a fanzine type of thing to tie into it as well. And twice it came like it was going to be done, and then something happened in our culture that put it on a hold for a while, and then never got picked up again. I haven't given up.
Anyway, the types of films that Something Weird released helped me personally learn about some of the cult directors that I'm now a huge fan of. Now, I had, prior to Something Weird, I already knew some some of the producers, Herschel Gordon Lewis and David F. Friedman. I was pretty familiar with them and had read about them. Um, Prior to the internet, I used to scour bookstores with information about for books about movies, and I still have a lot of those. I bought a lot of them. Every We used to go to the original Borders bookstore in Ann Arbor. This was years and years ago, which was a great bookstore. I was really sad when Borders closed.
Had them in New York too. Yes, they were excellent.
Yeah, they were. And those were that and B. Dalton, oddly, which was a mall bookseller, but they had a really solid collection of film books.
Hmm.
And I used to go to B. Dalton quite a bit, and then obviously the local bookstores and the bookstores that you would find in big cities. Even Pittsburgh had a couple of great bookstores. And incidentally, that's where Count Floyd is from. It's Pittsburgh. Joe Flaherty. Anyway, I had heard of some other uh, B movie directors that I wanted, fairly obscure ones who did exploitation, that I wanted to see their films. And, thanks to Something Weird Video, I was able to do it. I'd heard about Doris Wishman, who directed a lot of these nudies, by the way, including the one that I have on right now, Blaze Stargo's Nudist. And it was, even today, it's somewhat unusual to see a female director, but in 1960, it was unheard of to have a female exploitation director. So she was a real trailblazer, and she was middle aged by the time she started directing movies. She was a widow, and her husband, when he died, they weren't in great financial shape. She had to work. And one of the ways that she supported herself was by making, somehow fell into exploitation, uh, directing exploitation films. She even appears in some of them. She appears in Blaze Stargo's News, but she's not naked. She was actually fairly conservative, so you just wouldn't to look at her and and apparently from what I've read to interact with her, you wouldn't guess that this is what she did for a living. But she made exploitation films. She tried her hand at horror, but exploitation films, not that Doris Wishman had a great deal of talent, but exploitation films is where her talent laid at the time. But her films, I think, are just fascinating. She's responsible for Deadly Weapons with Chesty Morgan and Secret Agent 73. And in Deadly Weapons, Chesty Morgan's very, very large breasts are also weapons to kill the bad guy with. It's kind of a crime drama in a way. And they're again just completely untitillating. I mean, there's nudity in them, but there's just nothing about it that's going to turn anybody on.
Hmm.
Uh, the only other female exploitation director that I can think of from even remotely that time period would be Stephanie Rothman. And she didn't get into exploitation until late 60s, early 70s. So Doris Wishman's really a trailblazer here. And not only for women, but for men too. She did some incredible film work on non-existent budgets. She had no money to work with, but the end results look pretty good. They don't really look bad. Even in Blaze Stargo's Nudist right now, everything's bright and colorful. Costumes seem to be of a decent quality. She's got Blaze all dressed up. Blaze looks great here, by the way. And incidentally, she is a West Virginia girl. She was from, I think, Cerrito, West Virginia, which is near Huntington. It's in the southern part of the state. And she left home at an early age and became a burlesque queen, essentially, and remained one for practically the rest of her life. But I never would have been able to have seen her Doris Wishman's catalog of films had it not been for Mike Rainey. And one director I'd never heard of before until something weird was Andy Milligan. Have you heard of him?
The name rings bells, but I'm drawing a blank.
He made amazingly bad movies. I mean, they are,
Amazingly, huh?
I mean, it's Ed Wood looks like Michael Curtiz next to Andy Milligan. I mean, now to be fair, Andy Milligan had didn't even have Ed Wood budgets. He had no money at all, and somehow I don't know how he did it. Somehow was able to pull off feature length movies. Now they're largely terrible, with a couple of exceptions. When he did have money, it tends to show up on screen. Um, but he usually didn't have any money, didn't have any stars. Occasionally, he would get a decent actor or two. His best movie, and I've seen a lot of his movies. His best movie is called The Body Beneath, which is a horror film. There's some nudity in it. It's The Body Beneath came out, I think, in 1970. It was probably shot 69, I would say. Um, it's like I said, kind of a straight up horror film, and the end of it is really creepy. I mean, the first few times that I watched it, I haven't seen it for a while, but the first few times that I watched it, it gave me the willies. I was kind of shocked by it. And I kept thinking, gosh, I wish the beginning of the movie had been as good as the end. But the end of the film is really creepy, well done. It does not look nearly as cheap as what I'm sure it was, which, like I said, Andy Milligan had no budget at all. He was also, well, I think a lot of directors do have emotional issues, and sometimes they come out in the movies that they make. And Andy Milligan was no exception to that. He had a very terrible relationship with his mother. I guess that's the only way I can put it. So the women in his films are kind of vile, you know. And he had a lot of fetishes rolled into some of his movies as well. Um, some of the dialogue looks like it's from an early sound film. It's very stilted from time to time, but it's, even at that though, kind of amazing films to watch. And if you want to see like grade Z filmmaking, guerrilla filmmaking, really, it's Andy Miller. No, you'll never see anything that bad again. I mean, some of his movies are just inept all the way around. And like I said, occasionally when he had enough time and money to spend on one, you could, it was like, wow, this isn't bad. And The Body Beneath would be that movie. He Something weird also distributed a lot of Harry Novak movies, which were these grindhouse early 70s. Um, at the time, they would have been R or even X rated, depending on how much nudity they showed. Oftentimes, there were comedies like This Stuff Will Kill You. Um, they were very cornball humor and breasts, essentially. Um, and those movies didn't do bad box office at the time. They weren't made for much money, but they did okay. They were fairly respectable in terms of the money they made versus the money that they cost to make. But those films would have vanished, without something weird. And I'm not sure without Mike Rainey anybody would have cared. But bringing them to light and showing us the trailers for them, and just to, kind of wondering where these filmmakers got these crazy ideas for movies, and then seeing them and just having your mouth agape, the whole time as you're watching it. It's a terrific experience, and then finding something new to sort of collect and build a cult around. For me, something weird really spurred on my interest in B movies and exploitation films in general. And like I said, that's a genre that we're never going to see again. People aren't inhibited enough anymore for exploitation to happen. And these exploitation films that Something Weird used to purvey, sadly, um, were made. They're so earnest. They were made for a purpose. They were made by people who had no money and no time, and sometimes no star. Sometimes, but sometimes somebody who was on their way up or on their way down would wander into one of these exploitation films. I had a couple of them on today. One of them is called Sting of Death. And it's also on a double bill with The Death Curse of Tartu. These were released in drive-ins in around 1967 as a double bill together. They're both made by the same filmmaker who made some other films as well. His name is William Griffey. And he shot a lot of his films in Florida Everglades. And the thing that caught my eye regarding Sting of Death, and one of the reasons that I pulled this out, and that's kind of how I got into tonight's topic, really, is that as we spoke a few weeks ago during Sword and Sandal Cinema, Mystery Science Theater 3000 is sort of coming back, at least in a limited way. And they're going to do 4 new films via the Riff Tracks people. Well, Sting of Death is one of the films that they're going to be
Oh,
doing.
wow.
And I probably had this DVD for 20 years, and I don't think I had ever watched Sting of Death. I watched Death Curse of Tartu, which is just mind-bendingly dull. It's not it's fun to watch, but there's just nothing going on there. And Sting of Death is actually more entertaining. And there again, this is a director, well, and writer sometimes anyway, who didn't have much money, but he shot these in color. They're quality productions. Each one of them has an actor or two who actually was a pro and went on to other things. They weren't just community theater people from Miami, which some of them are. But anyway, Sting of Death, I think Griffey spent the most money on Neil Sedaka because Neil Sedaka does the two of the songs for the movie, or I
Or
should say the two songs for the movie.
were they done for the movie, or were they just used? Oh, wow.
And they're awful. You know, Neil Sedaka just passed away just maybe a month or two ago. Very quick, very sudden. His family didn't expect it. He went the way that I think he should go. Just he was in there slugging till the end. I used to follow him on social media, and he knew everyone in music. Or actually, he just knew everyone. Period. He had pictures. He went out to lunch a lot, and he would always post photos from it. He would be like with Alice Cooper. And I'm like, who knew that Alice Cooper and Neil Sedaka ever met? And then he would be with Sting, or I mean big, huge names, and people I just never knew that he knew, and he just seemed to know everyone, and was a fan, and knew about their music, knew their catalog. His knowledge of music must have been encyclopedic, and his knowledge of musicians. I mean, he knew a lot of very very famous people, and hung around with them. And I really miss his Facebook presence because I used to look at it every day, and I'm a fan. I loved his stuff in the '70s when I was a kid. Um, he did like Bad Blood and the
Yeah,
Immigrant
Bad Blood.
Song, and he redid Breaking Up Is Hard to Do. And on the day that I found out he passed away, I had Calendar Girl stuck in my head from the early '60s, and I couldn't get it out of there. And then I watched the Scopatone for it on YouTube, and I didn't know there was a Scopatone of it until he passed away. The Scopatone's a lot of fun for Calendar Girl. It's in bright color. I don't. Do you know what a Scopatone is?
No, I don't.
Okay. Debbie Reynolds and her husband invested in the early 1960s and invested in this contraption, a machine that would play music videos. And they were sold primarily to bars, and they ran with 16 millimeter film. And they had high fidelity speakers in it. And a lot of them, some then current acts would do films for Scopatone. Debbie Reynolds did a few. April Stevens and Nino Tempo did some. Joy Lansing, who was primarily an actress, even did one. And like I said, Nancy Sinatra did a couple of Scopatones as well. It only lasted for a couple of years. The machinery was very expensive, not to mention the 16 millimeter film breaking, getting very brittle and breaking after so many plays. But some of the old Scopatones still survive. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Something Weird actually did have somebody put out a DVD of a bunch of the Scopatones. And I'm thinking it might have been Something Weird. I can't remember. It could have. Well, this sounds like Something Weird. Sounds like something
Yeah,
weird.
it sounds like something you would have.
Well, you can see them on YouTube. So I just I never did. I well, if it's there, I never did collect them. I've got a couple actually on the drive-in page. I have one on the Joy Lansing page for a song that she did called "Web of Love," which
Mhm.
is campy as all get out. It's just something to watch. Lots of fun. Well, sadly, going on with Something Weird video. Sadly, Mike Rainey got sick in his middle years. And he had lung cancer and had it for a number of years. He went down swinging. I mean, he fought it for as long as he could. But he passed away a little over 12 years ago from lung cancer. He was 56 years old. And his legacy, Something Weird video, was passed on to his life partner, his wife, Lisa Petrucci, that is. And she had been doing what she could with it for probably the first 10 years or so, and then started announcing that, hey, I'm going to have to pack this up. for a lot of reasons. I mean, the market disappeared, unfortunately, for physical media. I think a lot of people who enjoyed these exploitation films, unfortunately, it kind of either gotten too old to watch them or have passed on in some cases, anyway. Um, and she developed some collaborations with kind of the next wave of entities that will serve us these psychotronic movies. And that includes the AGFA, which is the American Genre Film Archive, Vinegar Syndrome, which I'm pretty familiar with, Severin Films, and Kino Lorber, which puts out some amazing content. I'm a big Kino Lorber fan, and I have a lot of their DVDs as well, or its DVDs, I guess would be the grammatically correct way to say that.
If you could send me links to those companies, I would greatly appreciate it. I'd love to look through the catalogs.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure they all have any kind of mail order presence, but yeah, I can certainly forward that on to you.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I was hope when she announced that she was going to start wrapping up something weird video. I had hoped that there was going to be some sort of streaming service or something like that, but I think she just wanted to say. I think something weird might have been a labor of love for her, but that was really Mike Rainey's brainchild. And it would be hard to spend that much of your life, with somebody else's vision as opposed to your own. You know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
Even if that person was your life partner, I mean, after a while, you'd be like, oh my God, this is not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I can certainly understand why somebody would say that. So unfortunately, something weird is kind of no more. I mean, there are some, you can still get some of the titles on DVD. Unfortunately, to get some of the ones that I've got right here and upstairs, you're going to have to go to eBay or maybe even Amazon. I would probably look at eBay first. But some of these you're just not going to be able to get anymore on physical media. It's just the way it is. So you'll have to get used copies. And one that I forgot to pull out that I can still see on the wall is one that I have a little anecdote about. When I was a kid, and you'll probably remember this. Did you listen to the AM radio much when you were a kid?
Yes,
Everybody had a transistor radio.
yes.
With the cord that went into the earpiece, and you just kind of kept that in, all the time, and listened to really staticky pop on AM on AM stations.
And eventually you play tapes on there too and listen to them. They had the radios with the tapes. Sometimes they had FM and AM. So you had like everything you needed to listen to music while you did whatever you were doing.
That was more late 70s, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking kind of early 70s. This was probably like 71, 72, maybe even 1970. I mean, I'm a little kid here. The local radio stations that played the pop music that I was listening to at the time as a small kid would also run ads for the local drive-ins. And we had, didn't live in a big city or anything, but we had a number of drive-ins in the area that were open mostly summer, spring, summer, fall. And I think it was the Tuscola, that's what it was called, Tuscola Drive-In, which was the closest one to us, ran a lot more exploitation stuff. And you would hear the radio ads for these exploitation films, on the stations that I was listening to. And some of the ads were just fantastic. You didn't get any visual. I mean, it was just, a voiceover. But there was one that I was just desperate to see called Bloodsuckers. The radio ads made it sound it's screaming, and it made it sound the most terrifying thing on earth. And I thought I want to go see this. So I essentially threw a fit until my parents took me to the drive-in so that we could go see it. And my mom in particular was a horror fan, so she would have been okay with it. And this movie was just not it just I mean, I've got it now for sentimental reasons, but it's not a very good movie. And it's also not scary in the slightest. It's actually it's just a British movie. It's kind of talky. It's it's about this hip swinger guy from the late 1960s, and he kind of falls into a den of these hip vampire people. Um, it's it's a fun movie to watch, but my little 6 year old heart was just broken by it because it was so boring, and it was British to boot. And back then, I mean, I love British films now, but back then, I always thought of them as being kind of talky and not maybe not as scary as British horror films should have been. Some of them are, but British films do tend to be a little talky. But even at that, and the next time another exploitation program at a drive-in came around, I threw a fit to go watch that too. So, but I was really disappointed in Bloodsuckers. Just not, and my copy of Bloodsuckers is something weird. It's actually the second film on the DVDs. It's the bottom of the double bill. I can't remember what the first one is. And my eyes aren't good enough to see it. I know it's up there, but I can't remember what the first film from that is. And the point that I really wanted to make here tonight was something weird. Was that due to Mike Rainey's efforts? I mean, I got quite an education on exploitation films thanks to him, and I certainly wouldn't have seen some of these movies, and some of the movies that something weird put out were among my favorites. And Sinister Cinema was also a competing um, mail order house with something weird. But I always thought that Sinister Cinema's copies just weren't curated the way that Mike Rainey and Something Weird would do with his. If he could find better elements, he did what he could to find better copies and help restore some of these back to
Mhm.
their original running lengths. And continually you work to get better and better prints. Um, the other concern did not, unfortunately. So that's another thing that I can thank Mike Rainey for.
I
Sinister
think
Cinema, I love Sinister Cinema for the fact that they did have some stuff that you couldn't find anywhere else, but the copies were largely horrible. And a lot of their stuff didn't really even get transferred to DVD. It just kind of petered out after a while.
you think someday somebody will find these in a garage and there'll be somebody who has been looking for them.
It'll be on this ancient thumb drive that somebody will somehow plug into a USB port,
It's like,
uh, and that's where they'll all be found.
because I remember when I had my TV show, I'd always look at treasures that were found, including a copy of the original Frankenstein movie, the really, really old copy. But I had no way,
The Edison one from 1910.
I had no way to screen it. And the guy wouldn't let me find a place to screen it. So I wasn't about to sink money into it. But now that's available. I don't know if it was that copy or another copy, but somebody did locate one that worked, and now we have that.
Well, and some of the content that Something Weird put out, and Sinister Cinema, and some of the other, certainly Mill Creek, and even Criterion's done some of it, really. Um, a lot of the stuff was public domain, especially the trailers.
Yes.
Most advertising for films back in the day was not did not have a copyright on it because these studios, well, and distributors really, I should say that more than the studio, wanted people to please take this, you spread this around, do something with it. Let's help promote this movie. And then they knew that, well, they thought that 3 months later this is going to be completely forgotten about. But everything comes back around, I guess.
Yes, it is.
And some of if you can find press kits or old posters or lobby cards for some of these old exploitation films, some of them can fetch lots of money, especially if they're in decent shape. They're really hard to find though, because they didn't make as many of them.
Yeah, I've known many collectors over the years, and they have crates of the movies in all sorts of formats, VHS, the the film, the DVD, the Blu-ray. They have the books, the press kits, the posters, and so for folks our age, it's a very engaging hobby.
Well, and I can't imagine one that is more fun, to tell you the truth. The only thing about it is that one of the things that I retired almost 3 years ago now. One of the things that I thought was like, gosh, I'm going to have all this time to sit around and watch this giant catalog of movies that I've got on DVD, and I try, but there's just no way. I'm going to die not having seen some of this stuff.
I'm in the same boat, and I had the same realization too. And now I'm trying to process that even if I sat down and actually watched everything and read everything, there isn't enough life left for me to do.
I know, and what's something weird? You typically didn't just get the movie, and you mentioned this earlier. You got trailers for other stuff. If he had any, oddball shorts, educational films, sometimes he would stick those in. So there's a lot of entertainment on a something weird DVD typically,
Yes, there is.
and
And
and with a lot of these, not all of them, with a lot of them though, especially the double bills, you get two movies, or in this case, three movies for the price of one. This has Blanca Blanca, Women of Wango, and Virgin Sacrifice. And these are all fairly short films.
you know what
Uh,
language you're speaking in Wild Women of Wango?
Ed Fury is in it.
That's Greek.
Oh, really?
Yes, it is. First time I watched that, people was like, "Oh, they're talking gibberish. I wonder if they're making it up." It's like, no, they're talking Greek.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
I feel
Do you
honored to.
remember? Well, do you remember if is what they are saying going along with the film itself? Hopefully,
Kind of. I don't remember beyond it being Greek and that some of it was pronounced well and some of it wasn't. So I'm assuming there were at least one or two Greek people involved in the production.
yeah, I would think. But uh, and we're just not going to see stuff like this anymore,
No.
unfortunately. And the only way to get it now is to either find like an old copy of it, or um, hopefully somebody who's taking good care of it. The last time I went or went DVD shopping, I should say, about a month ago. Not, yeah, about a month ago. And we went to Half Price Books and Ides Entertainment. I did buy a couple at Ides anyway. But that's been my last fix of physical media. But what? My cat's.
Your cat's okay?
She's just she's being ignored, and she's making it known that she doesn't like to be.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
but yeah,
My dog is taking up scratching my leg when she's feeling ignored.
sometimes she'll just sink her teeth and knock things over, which she's trying to do right now. But hit the road. Come on. There she did.
I
Okay.
got nostalgic for barbarian movies recently because the new Deathstalker movie came out.
Oh yeah.
And it was fun, but it wasn't an 80s, an early 80s barbarian film by any stretch. It had some of the tropes, but not enough to have the distinct character of being from that era. But I enjoyed it, so I wanted to watch my barbarian tapes. I have no idea what crate they're stored in.
Mm.
So I figured let me just go to Amazon um, and other places like eBay and see if I could pick some up. And they've gotten expensive.
Yeah, they have. Um, I I don't do it very often, and and I have DVDs here that nobody wants that aren't worth anything. But I was surprised at some of the stuff that I have that's out of print. And I've got some number of sets, and I've been surprised that some of them are like three or four times what I paid for,
Yes.
used.
Yes.
Um,
Deathstalker 3 and 4, which are the harder ones to get. I have those too. I might have a couple of copies of them. but one of them was like $399 and the other one was like $70. It's like, whoa, you could
Ooh,
give these away for many years, you know?
yeah, no. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Uh, and
But
unfortunately, I'm not a seller, I'm just a buyer. So
I'm not a seller either for those. For those, I told my wife for the things that I really love, I'm going to hold on to until I'm no longer here. Then you can get rid of them. But I want them while I draw breath. I want to be able to enjoy them whenever I want to.
mhm. Me, same here. Same for me. Um, let me see what else I've got. Oh, this one. Oh my. Oh, and speaking of Peplum films, my best copy of Hercules and the Moon Men is something weird. So they did all kinds of genre too, and they used to do a lot of educational films,
Yes.
scare films, which I think are a lot of fun. Now, some of them I'm not that crazy about. The car crash videos, I'm not a big fan of. Some of the titles are Signal 30. That's probably the most famous one. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
They used to show them in driver's ed, I think,
Yes.
to scare kids.
I remember those from Driver's Ed.
And you can actually find them on archive.org because they are without a copyright.
Awesome.
Um, well, and they're all mostly shot in, in the late 50s through the late 1960s by a guy who used to follow the Mansfield, Ohio Police Department around, and he had a camera, and he eventually worked with the police department on undercover stings and such. But kind of an odd guy. I'm not sure somebody I would be interested in knowing because he would listen to the police scanner and then would show up at accident sites with his camera rolling.
That's traumatic for the families if they didn't know it or prove it and they were in the driver's ed class and saw it. That would be horrible.
I would think so. Yeah. Um, and these are gruesome too. I mean, there's one scene and I think it's in Signal 30 where this truck driver has just been kind of mashed into the cab of his
Oh,
truck, and it's a big truck, and it is his head's kind of, it's well, um, so there's stuff like that too. I guess there's a market for it, but
I think I'll
ugh.
find one.
I guess. And some of the other educational stuff that Something Weird put out is not, that gruesome, certainly. But those old driver's ed films, oh, they're just really hard to take. They were showing those when I was in high school. No, I didn't see them in high school, but some people, I don't think our high school ran those or used them, but I have since met other people who said, yeah, they showed those to us in driver's ed. I did not
In,
have that experience.
I had those in driver's ed and I had in grammar school some of the and in high school some of the scare ones for drugs and for different
Oh, okay. I was going to
and
say, why are they showing it in elementary school? Uh, I don't remember a lot of. I remember a lot of educational, the 16 millimeter stuff that they would show in class, but I don't remember a lot of the scare or the hygiene or the scare stuff. A lot of the ones that came out of the 30s and 40s and 50s were hygiene.
yes, many
It's
things
up,
that happened in elementary school I wonder why they happened, but that's another story altogether.
well, and a lot of the ones for that came out during World War II were sexual hygiene. Really
Hmm.
how to avoid the clap and things like that, and syphilis. Um, and well, actually, they were just preaching abstinence, but still, I mean, they were of a time period, I suppose. And then there were also there was one called, oh God, what's that called? Mom and Dad and Because of Eve, that showed actual births. And apparently, I think it was Because of Eve when they were running it in the late 40s, early 1950s. Some men just in the audience just freaked out, and either left the theater or got sick, or because they'd never seen anything quite like that. And it's just a live birth. I mean, it wasn't,
Uh-huh.
it wasn't horrific or anything, but they just were, I guess, grossed out by it.
I guess these were urban people, not people who grew up in farming communities. Or
I guess there's always been uh, naive people, but you're right. I mean, anybody who'd been on a farm would know,
right, what they were watching.
would understand biology. Yeah, you're right. But I don't recall a lot of those in school. Um, a lot of the ones that I remember, the educational films, were just uh, basic biology of the life of a bug, stuff like that. How plants mature from seeds. I don't recall any of the scare films. At least they could have run them, but I don't any of them. Nothing sticks out.
I'm looking forward to putting the show together tonight, and coming up with something clever for something weird to put in the title.
Well, isn't that a great title for a
Yes.
video? Do something weird, which is and he took the name from a Herschel Gordon Lewis movie from 1967, I think. And I think that's where he took the name. And you'll recall whenever you used to put a something weird DVD in the DVD player, it would run this 8, 9, 10 minute
With
the
music.
same one at that, but it was essentially just a compendium of
Yes.
pieces of different movies that something weird had in their catalog, and a lot of them were these exploitation films like Scum of the Earth, Bare Blonde and Beautiful, some of the Herschel Gordon Lewis stuff. Uh, Herschel Gordon Lewis made, well, a lot of people know him for making horror films, but he also did exploitation nudies before that as well with David F. Friedman. He and David F. Friedman had a falling out in the mid '60s and kind of went their separate ways. But Herschel Gordon Lewis, I guess, sort of became he was the one who became the cult figure, not David F. Friedman.
Yeah, I have stories about that too, but that'll wait another day. Um,
One thing that I saw I looked up a couple of obituaries on Mike Rainey, and one of them referred to something weird video as the criterion of sleaze, which I thought was an interesting way to put it. Uh, I kind of liked that. And my whole point is this: I think he exposed, a generation of people to these exploitation titles, which would have otherwise probably just have been lost to time. And he worked for years. He spent probably 25 years of his life or more, trying to rescue, some of these movies. And as he found out more about them, he, went down a rabbit hole and just started pulling out title after title after title and finding good copies of them, which is amazing. So many films, and this is something I preach every once in a while, but so many films are lost.
yes.
Most films made before 1930 are missing; they're just gone. A lot of films made before 1970 are gone. I mean, there's a shocking number of that have just vanished or just lost to time. And these would have been gone had it not been for Mike Rainey and something weird. And I think Mystery Science Theater has also helped that along because they
Yes.
came along. Those two came along around the same time. Mystery Science Theater started in '88, and something weird started in 1990. And I think they did feed off of each other, to an extent. They're not. It's not quite the same concern. Something weird kind of boosted these movies, lifted them up, and Mystery Science Theater, did more satire with them. But either way, you did pull a lot of people into the exploitation films and made them what they are today. I have a student in one of my classes who's maybe 21 years old. He's a big believer in physical media and knows a lot of these titles, which I think is fascinating because this is so far removed from these films are so far removed from the 21st century. Really, they're old for one thing. Exploitation films now are 60, 70, 80 years old, um,
When
and
this is
and
when,
difficult to find.
and we will continue this inquiry another day. How can people find you and find Brian's Drive-In Theater and experience the shrine that you built to movies such as this? Because you're not part of the story of the preservation of things old and beloved.
Well, in some little way, sure. And I'm certainly still carrying the torch,
Yeah.
for a lot of old B movies. I think they're a lot of fun. And if you want to have some fun with old B movies, you stop by briansdrivein theater.com and you'll find profiles for more than 300 actors and actresses from the great B movie drive-in era from 1930s to the 1980s. Also, most of those pages have content on them, content from the Internet Archive, and that those will be in the form of public domain films, television shows, even scopatones, depending on which page that you might land on. And if you want to interact with me on social media, I am still only on Facebook. No plans to change that in the immediate present. But look me up on Facebook, Brian's Drive-In Theater, and we'll take you to Brian Walker's page.
Thank you so very much. And I realized something the other day.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for nearly a decade, but I
Mhm.
actually have been communicating with you much longer than that because I had my show in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And it was during the show that I was making copies of your website in case it disappeared. And I contacted you by email a couple of times. So we didn't connect and continue talking, but we did exchange emails a few times. So he will get back to you if you email him. And who knows, you might make a wonderful friend as well. Thank you, Brian. Say hi to Greg. Say hi to the kitty. Apologize to the kitty for my taking your attention away from her.
Oh,
And
she's still right here.
oh, okay. Now we'll talk to you very soon.
All right, take care, Hercules.
Okay, be well.